Welcome to TFR Let's Talk. I'm your host, Swapnil Bhartiya, and my next guest is Priya Nagpurkar, Director of Hybrid Cloud Platform at IBM Research. Priya, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
IBM Research has recently announced CodeFlare. It's an open source framework for kind of simplifying the integration and efficient scaling of big data and AI workflow, especially for the hybrid cloud. So I want to know from you, first of all, can you define or can you explain what exactly is CodeFlare?
Sure. So CodeFlare, as you said, is about those end-to-end workflows and pipelines. And if you look at other frameworks for machine learning and AI, they focus on individual tasks. But what we saw, the motivation behind CodeFlare was this emergence of these converged workflows. So you have AI, machine learning, big data, and even simulations and modeling all coming together into tight integrated workflows. And this is happening in various industries and is producing better results than traditional techniques. And the challenge there was when you bring these techniques together and integrate them, the approach to scale and parallelize and run this on the cloud was different for each one of them. So as a user, you were dealing with a fragmented landscape of how do I run this scalably. So the vision behind CodeFlare is, can we elevate the abstraction to just, I can write about this pipeline in Python in a high level programming interface, and I leave the runtime, one runtime, single runtime that can then take my workflow and execute it scalably. So this is, in our view, extending, we hear about serverless. So, the value proposition of serverless is when I can think about my logic and I have higher level interfaces and I don't have to worry about the runtime aspects. How do I scale? How do I map it to, massive infrastructure? So that's really how it's different. It's different in dealing with these workflows rather than individual elements of them.
One core factor is also scalability. So how scalable is CodeFlare?
So I'll start by saying that CodeFlare's vision is again from laptop to say a single cluster to many, many clusters and many cores on the cloud and enabling that. And it's building, when it comes to those large scale kind of infrastructures, it's building on proven technologies as a foundation. So it's building on Kubernetes and Ray. These are the two key elements of the platform that CodeFlare sits on top of. So if you look at these proven platforms, you can easily imagine scaling to hundreds of nodes today. And I think our vision, we are really pushing together with these communities, Ray and Kubernetes, to go to thousands of cores in the future, from hundreds to thousands. And I think the second important aspect of scalability is also data, right? I spoke about compute and nodes, but we also want to be able to scale to bigger and bigger data sets and running those on the cloud. So you can imagine, again, a single CodeFlare pipeline being able to deal with petabytes of data. So these are two elements of scalability, but I would like to emphasize that we're really building on those foundations, right, of Kubernetes and Ray that are providing us that scalability. And one other aspect is ultimately what we want to do is not only enable these larger scale workloads, which are not possible, right? If you just run on your laptop, you're fairly limited by the size of problems you can deal with. But there's also an agility aspect here. So if you can easily scale and have, harness the power of this cloud infrastructure, you as a data scientist and developer can do much more, much quicker. So we have also seen from our internal use cases that you can do things, much faster, and pipelines that might have taken you months to scale on the cloud can now just be done in days.
Since you mentioned the open source component that you're using there, you have also open sourced. IBM does a lot of open source, but open source, is done for a couple of reasons. So can you also talk about, why you decided to make CodeFlare open source?
Yeah, as you mentioned, IBM has done open source for a long time, and now with our acquisition of Red Hat, I think we are embracing even more an open source approach to many things we do. Particularly for CodeFlare, though, I would say one aspect of it makes it important to be out there in the community, which is it's at the intersection of at least three communities I can think of: AI, cloud, and even HPC. So I think CodeFlare sits at that intersection where we need to evolve it with input and participation from these three communities, and that's best done in the open. IBM internally, of course, focuses on all of these three. These are our strengths. We traditionally have done a lot of HPC, and AI and cloud are big focus areas for us. But we do believe interfaces like CodeFlare's pipeline interface or the technologies that it builds on are also open source, as we saw, Ray and Kubernetes. So I think the bottom line is we think that being out in the open as open source is the way to accelerate innovation that's required in this space. And as you know, it's a very rapidly evolving space. So not being in the open source would, I think, really not only slow it down, stifle innovation, and it would probably not evolve it in a meaningful way. We really need these communities to participate, the experts, and we welcome actually their influence on the project so that we can more meaningfully evolve it.
Right. And as you're saying, IBM has been doing open source for a long time, but IBM is also a big organization. And you folks, of course, Red Hat acquisitions there, you folks do a lot of things with a lot of communities. So how does CodeFlare community work with other community, or do you work in your own silos just like any other open source community, or do you internally interact with each other as well?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I think, as I said, in IBM, even research, right, where I come from, we have AI and cloud as two big research organizations. And even internally, as we started, identified this problem and started working on it, it was a collaboration across these two big organizations in IBM Research. And I think even the skill sets, if you look at there, we had people who were working, doing proof of concepts with various industries, be it drug discovery or supply chain kind of optimization. So they had the use cases and the workloads, right? And we had core expertise in even places like Auto AI, where I think these were the people who understood the challenges. And then you bring the cloud expertise there, where our kind of focus is distributed systems, scalability, performance. So bringing these together is how CodeFlare came about. And it wouldn't have been possible without this internal collaboration. As you said, organizations can be big. But I think it just validated our hypothesis that there's a lot of value to unlock in this particular intersection and area. Because usually, in big organizations, unless there are shared value and shared goals, that collaboration is hard to make happen. So internally, this is how it worked. And so now externally, I think we envision the same. As I said, we want engagement from both these communities.
Once again, the answer is already there, but how do you plan to engage you mentioned a couple of communities that, touching the points. Can you talk about what strategy do you have to kind of engage this community? As I said, the answer is already there, but I just want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think now the project is a couple of weeks old, and I think like with many projects like this, we are eagerly kind of looking at the reaction and looking for validation that yes, it's indeed kind of a space that others see value in. And I think we have had a few small contributions already from external contributors. We are actively talking with all the synergies we have, for example, with Ray as a key component of CodeFlare. So we are actively exploring with them how they see these two things coming together and what roadmaps we envision, what problems we want to solve. So I think this is already one way in which we are validating, okay, is it the right problem? Are there others interested in forwarding this? And a few of those discussions have already started within the other open source projects and partners there. And I think even coming to IBM and Red Hat's other key big bets and investments, we already see a lot of opportunity with, say, what we are doing with OpenShift, with even academic communities, where we want to make it easy for people to try new technologies like CodeFlare, like Ray. So we are working on making that happen as well. So I think Red Hat has a Massachusetts Open Cloud initiative, for example. So we are exploring how we can make it easy for students who use that cloud and other constituents to just easily use CodeFlare. And I think this will give us input from on the value, and also on where people find additional gaps, or how does this need to evolve. So these are just some of the directions. I think the Kubernetes angle is another one where we have a lot of a vision and experience on how Kubernetes and Ray and CodeFlare can come together and be better integrated together. So there are resource management and how do you support multi-tenancy and many aspects like that, where we are bringing these elements together. And I think this is the sign of a good, healthy, growing community where others also see value and see how this could come together. And I think ultimately I'll say our users, we do have both internal as well as IBM clients who are at least interested. They see this as an emerging, interesting technology, and we are trying to understand from their use cases. I mentioned a few before, right? We have seen evidence for supply chain optimization, or even semiconductor manufacturing anomaly detection, or in some of the financial space, predictive modeling and so on. So I think these are some of the ways in which we will grow this community and evolve it in the right way.
Right. You answered my next question, which was more or less about, first of all, companies are like IBM. You don't create project in vacuum. It's created because you did see some need and demand from the ecosystem, or so you gave some use cases where developers are using it. One thing interesting with open source is that for large organizations, it's very easy. They can go in there. They have all the resources to start using any open source project. But a lot of other organizations, sometimes open source can solve day one problem, but then after that, you need additional features, functionalities, management update. So that's where commercialization of open source plays a big role. So can you also talk about how do you want to make it accessible to all those folks who may not want to invest resources to use it as an open source project?
That's right. Yeah, that's a great question and goes to the core of the value we see in it. I spoke about serverless in the very beginning, but if you ask me, this is how we see our platform evolving. So we have cloud is major focus area for us as IBM, and this is the evolution of our cloud platform to cater to richer emerging workloads. And to evolve in a way that people can then come and do these things on, be it IBM public cloud or our hybrid cloud play with OpenShift. So this is how it connects back to our core value, and it's about data scientist and developer productivity. But that productivity is easiest when used on our cloud platform. So that's our vision for it. And that's also, I think, why I described it as building on top of our existing foundation, which is Kubernetes and OpenShift. And then think of, Ray and CodeFlare as the evolution of this stack on what are those high-value frameworks that are going to further simplify the life of developers and data scientists. On the portfolio side, I talked about the evolution of the cloud platform. But of course, as you know, IBM also has things like Watson Studio and tooling for data scientists and developers. I think that's kind of the whole how this all comes together, right? You have a rich enough platform, and then you have tools for the data scientists and developers. And I'll go even further. The last kind of comment I will make as a bigger vision is I think today machine learning and data science is still siloed in a way and different from, say, all the traditional cloud native development. But we have heard from everyone that AI-infused business process, AI-infused, applications, this is the future. So for us, I think this is also a key part. So we see kind of our platform evolving into a rich enough platform to support both of these and build the meaningful bridges here so that we can come closer to that AI-infused future for all of our cloud-native applications on a single platform with rich tools.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, this could be just a hypothesis. Like we always talk about, hey, in the early days, we say, hey, you have to be a software company if you want to survive. It doesn't matter what you do. And now we talk about you should have a cloud strategy. And slowly, as even the businesses are evolving, edge is becoming a very critical piece of what we do. all of this is useless without AI ML. If you don't have that intelligence there, what's the point of having? So, do you also see a future where it will not be siloed? We will start saying that, hey, if you don't have AI ML strategy as part of your business, you will not survive.
Yeah, I think you're right. So you pointed out already how everybody has recognized that having a cloud strategy, you must have it. But we have also seen that some sort of intelligence and analytics, be it AI or just analytics, it's absolutely, I think, everywhere today. So be it retail for customer experience, you talked about edge. So all of that IoT and sensors and other kind of even automotive, name it. You have compute power today almost everywhere in the spread across and pervasive. And a key element of where innovation is happening is this data-driven insights. For real-time various aspects of serving customers better and automating things. So you're right. I think that no matter what you do, increasingly some insights from data is going to be absolutely essential. And you also mentioned edge. I think there also, at least our vision, and I think largely many in the industry are starting to describe it like this, that extending the value proposition of cloud, which is, scale as you need it and agility, really. And that we are investing so much in making cloud easy. So the DevOps model, how I develop on cloud. So we want this to seamlessly extend to the edge. We don't want to develop separate platforms and different tools and different DevOps models. So I think our vision there is really we want the cloud to seem like a seamless extension all the way out to the edge. And we want those properties of, I can scale as I need. I have the agility I want, and I have rich enough tools and platform. We want that to extend to the edge.
Right, and with the maturity of 5G and democratization of 5G by the government last year, they released some spectrum there. Plus, when you look at automation, everybody talks about automation. The next step is automation itself. So I think absolutely, it's going to be an interesting area and an interesting field. We are in the early phase, but I think the same thing will happen. Suddenly, so much things will start happening in this space. Suddenly, it will be a mainstream, and we won't even realize.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree.
Priya, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only this open source project, but we also talked about AI ML, that how soon we will start talking about it as a main thing, not as a siloed or a afterthought. Thanks for your insights, and I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was my pleasure.